I was still bleeding from a C-section performed 3 days ago, clutching my newborn in the freezing Seattle rain. My husband, Graham, rolled down the window of his SUV and tossed a crumpled $20 bill into a mud puddle at my feet. He said the bus was safer for his new leather seats. He thought he had won. But 2 hours later, a single phone call stripped him of every dime he thought he owned. My name is Eloise Gray, and I was standing on the curb of the patient pickup zone at Cascade Memorial Women's Center, shivering in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was a typical Seattle afternoon, the kind where the sky looks like a bruised plum and the rain does not fall so much as it hangs in the air. A freezing mist that soaks through your clothes before you even realize you are wet. I clutched my daughter to my chest. She was exactly 3 days old. She was a tiny, fragile thing, wrapped in a pink blanket that was quickly dampening with the mist. My other hand gripped the handle of a plastic bag filled with dirty hospital laundry and the few toiletries I had packed when my water broke. Every breath I took sent a sharp, tearing line of fire across my lower abdomen. The C-section incision was fresh, a raw and angry reminder that my body had been cut open to bring this life into the world. The painkillers were wearing off, leaving behind a dull, throbbing ache that radiated down my legs and up into my spine. I checked my phone again. Graham had said he would be here 10 minutes ago. The wind picked up, whipping my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. I tried to shield the baby, turning my back to the gust, hunched over like a question mark. I felt pathetic. I felt small. I felt like a complication that had not been factored into the schedule. Then I saw it. The black SUV turned the corner, its polished body gleaming under the gray sky. It was a beast of a machine, a top-of-the-line model that cost more than most people made in 3 years. It moved with a silent, predatory grace, the tires hissing against the wet asphalt. My heart lifted for a fraction of a second. He was here. I could get into the heated interior. I could sit down. I could stop hurting. The car pulled up to the curb, but the engine did not cut out. The passenger side window slid down with a smooth electric hum. I stepped forward, my hand reaching for the door handle, ready to collapse into the seat. But the door did not unlock. I stopped, confused, blinking against the rain. Through the open window, a wave of warm air hit me, smelling of expensive leather and that crisp, artificial scent of a new car. I looked inside, expecting to see an empty seat waiting for me. Instead, I saw my mother-in-law, Darla Pierce. She was sitting in the front passenger seat, the seat that should have been mine. She was dressed as if she were heading to a gala, wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat that looked impossibly soft and a pearl necklace that caught the dim light. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, sprayed into a helmet of blonde ambition that the humidity dared not touch. In the back seat, behind her, sat my sister-in-law, Brittany. She was scrolling on her phone, the blue light illuminating a face full of contour makeup and boredom. She wore a sequined cocktail dress that seemed ridiculous for a Tuesday afternoon, but perfect for the life they pretended to lead. And in the driver's seat was my husband, Graham Pierce, the CEO of North Sky Dynamics, the father of the child in my arms. He did not look at me. His hands were gripping the leather steering wheel at 10 and 2. His knuckles white, his jaw set in that tight line he used when he was negotiating a contract he did not want to sign. He stared straight ahead through the windshield, watching the windshield wipers slice back and forth. "Graham," I said, my voice cracking, "open the door. It is freezing." He didn't move. He didn't even turn his head. It was Darla who spoke first. She turned to look at me, her eyes sweeping over my disheveled hair, my pale face, the stained sweatpants I was wearing because nothing else fit over the swelling, and the plastic bag of dirty clothes. She looked at me, not with hatred, but with something worse, disgust. It was the way one looks at a smear of mud on a pristine white carpet. "Eloise," Darla said, her voice smooth and cold, like vodka kept in the freezer. "You cannot get in here." I stared at her, the rain dripping from my nose. What are you talking about? Look at you, she said, gesturing vaguely at my midsection. You just had surgery. You smell like fluids, like antiseptic and sickness. Graham just had the interior done. This is Napa leather, custom stitched. We cannot have you ruining the aesthetic. My brain could not process the words. The pain in my stomach flared as I shifted my weight, trying to keep the baby steady. Darla, please, I just had a C-section. I cannot stand out here. The baby is cold. The baby is fine, she dismissed, waving a manicured hand. Babies are resilient. Leather is not. It absorbs odors. I looked past her to Graham. Graham, please, tell her to stop. Unlock the door. Graham finally turned his head. He looked at me, but his eyes were empty. There was no warmth, no concern, no recognition that I was the woman he had married, the woman who had just birthed his legacy. He looked at me like I was a stranger soliciting change at a traffic light. Don't make a scene, Eloise, he said. His voice was calm, reasonable, the voice he used to reassure investors when the numbers were shaky. Mom is right. I just spent $2,000 on a full detail and ceramic coating for the interior. It smells like a new car in here. You smell like the hospital. I am your wife, I whispered, the shock numbing me more than the cold. This is your daughter. She is 3 days old. And she will be fine, Graham said, turning back to the windshield. Just take the bus. It stops right there on the corner. It will take you 20 minutes to get to the apartment. You can shower when you get there. Clean yourself up before you handle anything in the house. The bus? I repeated. The words tasted like ash. You want me to take a bus in the rain with a newborn and an open incision? From the back seat, Brittany let out a short, sharp laugh. She didn't look up from her phone. Oh my God, stop being so dramatic. Eloise, she drawled, her thumbs flying across the screen. We are on a tight schedule. Graham just closed the big merger deal. We are going to Aurora Prime to celebrate. We cannot exactly roll up to the valet with a milk-stained mom in the back seat, can we? It ruins the vibe. She lifted her phone, angling it to capture herself, the back of Graham's head, and the blurred rain outside. Hey guys, she said to her screen, her voice pitching up an octave into that fake influencer cheer. Heading to the victory dinner. North Sky Dynamics just crushed it. So proud of my big bro. Life is good. She didn't pan the camera to me. I didn't exist in her frame. I was outside the narrative. Graham, I said, my voice rising, desperation clawing at my throat. I cannot walk to the bus stop. I can barely stand. Please. Graham sighed, a heavy sound of irritation. He shifted in his seat, reaching into the pocket of his tailored Italian suit jacket. He pulled out his wallet, the slim carbon fiber one I had bought him for our first anniversary. He slipped a bill out and cracked the window a fraction of an inch wider. Here, he said. He flicked his wrist. A single $20 bill fluttered out of the window. It caught the wind, twisting in the air for an agonizing second, before slapping down into a puddle of oily, murky water right next to my shoe. Take the bus, Graham said. That is enough for the fare. Keep the change. Get yourself a slice of pizza or something. Just don't wait up for us. I looked down at the money. Harriet Tubman's face was drowning in the dirty water. You are joking, I breathed. I never joke about money. Eloise, you know that, Graham said. He tapped the button on his door, and the window slid up, sealing them back inside their hermetically sealed bubble of success and comfort. I stood there, frozen. I saw my reflection in the tinted glass as the window closed. I looked like a ghost. My hair was matted to my skull. My skin was the color of old paper, and my eyes were wide, dark hollows of disbelief. I looked broken. I looked like trash. And they were looking at me. Through the glass, I could see Darla adjusting her pearl necklace, saying something to Graham that made him nod. Brittany was checking her angles in the selfie camera. They were right there, 3 feet away, separated by a sheet of glass and a universe of indifference. The engine revved, a low, powerful growl. Graham took his foot off the brake. The massive tires began to roll. "Wait," I cried out, instinctively reaching forward, but my hand only brushed the cold. Wet metal of the door panel. The SUV accelerated. The back tire hit the same deep puddle where the money lay. A sheet of freezing, gritty water arched up into the air and slapped across my legs, soaking the hem of my skirt and splashing onto the blanket wrapping my daughter. She let out a small, startled cry. Shifting in my arms, I stood in the wake of the vehicle, watching the red taillights fade into the gray curtain of rain. They didn't tap the brakes. They didn't hesitate. They just merged into traffic and disappeared, heading toward the finest steakhouse in the city to celebrate a victory built on money that technically was not even theirs. The water on my legs was freezing, but the burning in my abdomen had changed. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was fuel. I looked down at the puddle. The $20 bill was still there, floating on the surface, darker now, heavy with water. A normal person might have left it. A person with dignity might have walked away, refusing to touch the symbol of their humiliation. But I was not just a person anymore. I was a mother with nothing but the clothes on her back and a husband who had just discarded us like used tissues. I shifted the baby to my left arm, gritting my teeth against the searing pain in my belly. I bent my knees slowly, agonizingly, until I could reach the ground. My fingers closed around the wet paper. It was cold and slimy. I squeezed it in my fist, water dripping between my knuckles. I straightened up, gasping for air as my incision protested the movement. I wiped the mud from the bill onto my soaked jacket. I stared at the crumpled currency. $20. The price of my dignity. The price of my comfort. The price of my husband's conscience. He thought this was charity. He thought this was a dismissal. He thought he had just solved a minor inconvenience by paying it to go away. He had no idea. He hadn't just given me bus fare. He had given me a receipt. He had given me the opening exhibit for the trial that was about to take place in the court of reality. I looked at the direction the SUV had gone. The rain was washing the tears off my face as fast as they fell. So to anyone watching, I just looked wet, but inside, the cold was gone. $20, I whispered to the rain. Okay, Graham, if that is what you think I am worth. I put the wet bill into my pocket, right next to the phone that I had not yet used. I wasn't going to call a taxi. I wasn't going to call a friend to come save me. I was going to take the bus. I was going to let this humiliation seep into my pores. I was going to let the cold harden me until I was as unyielding as the diamond on Brittany's finger. Because in 2 hours, when he tried to pay for that $2,000 bottle of wine, he was going to find out that the only money he had left in the world was the $20 he had just thrown in the mud. I turned away from the spot where the SUV had been and began to walk toward the bus stop. One painful step at a time. The distance between the hospital pickup zone and the bus shelter was less than a football field, maybe 50 yards of slick concrete, but traversing it felt like wading through waist-deep mercury. Every step was a negotiation with gravity. My body, which had been sliced open and stapled back together only 72 hours prior, screamed in protest. The incision across my lower abdomen felt less like a healing wound and more like a zipper that was threatening to burst open with every movement of my hips. I pulled my coat tighter around the baby. She was so small, a warm, vibrating weight against my chest, oblivious to the fact that her first journey into the world was a march through freezing rain rather than a glide in a leather-upholstered chariot. I tucked the flap of my coat over her head, creating a makeshift tent to shield her from the drizzle that was turning into a steady, soaking downpour. Reaching the bus shelter offered little relief. It was a glass box smeared with graffiti and grime, smelling faintly of urine and stale tobacco. I leaned against the plexiglass wall, trying to take the weight off my legs without bending my waist. My breath came in shallow, ragged puffs of white mist. I looked down at my sneakers, now soaked through to the socks, and imagined the bacteria from the sidewalk seeping into the fabric. When the bus finally rounded the corner, its brakes screeching like a dying animal, it was packed. Of course it was. It was rush hour in Seattle. And while the tech elite were safe in their Teslas and Rovers, The rest of the city was crammed into these steel tubes, trying to get home to Renton or Shoreline. The doors hissed open. I hoisted the bag of dirty laundry, the plastic handles cutting into my wrist, and climbed the steps. 1, 2, 3. Each stair required a distinct, agonizing effort that made sweat prickle along my hairline despite the cold. I tapped my card, thank God I had my old transit card in my wallet, and moved into the aisle. The atmosphere hit me like a physical wall. It was hot, humid, and thick with the scent of wet wool, cheap body spray, and the distinct, metallic tang of too many bodies in a confined space. Condensation dripped down the windows, blurring the city outside into streaks of gray and neon. "Move back," the driver yelled over his shoulder, his voice tired and flat. "Keep moving back." I shuffled forward. The bus lurched into motion, and I grabbed a yellow pole with my free hand, my knuckles turning white. The sudden movement sent a jolt of fire through my midsection that was so sharp my vision momentarily grayed out. I gasped, an ugly, wet sound, and squeezed my eyes shut, praying I wouldn't faint. I opened my eyes and looked around. Every seat was taken. People were engrossed in their phones, wearing noise-canceling headphones, or simply staring blankly at the advertisements for personal injury lawyers above the windows. A teenage boy in a hoodie occupied the priority seat, his eyes closed, head bobbing to music I couldn't hear. A woman with 3 grocery bags took up 2 seats near the back. No one looked up. No one saw the woman with the hospital bracelet still on her wrist, holding a newborn, trembling from surgical trauma. I was invisible. To my husband, I was a stain to be wiped away. To these strangers, I was just another obstacle in their commute. I braced my hip against the wheel well, trying to absorb the shocks of the road with my legs rather than my core. The bus hit a pothole, and I bit my lips so hard I tasted copper. "Ma'am." The voice was low and gravelly. I blinked, looking down. A man sitting halfway down the aisle was standing up. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, wearing a high-visibility construction vest stained with drywall dust and oil. His face was lined with exhaustion, the kind that comes from 30 years of manual labor, and he held a battered lunch pail. He looked like he needed that seat more than anyone else on this bus. He gestured to the empty space he had just vacated. "Sit, please." I looked at him, and for a second, my throat constricted so tightly I couldn't speak. After the cruelty of the last hour, this simple, transactional kindness felt overwhelming. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the roar of the engine. "Thank you so much." I sank into the hard plastic seat, and the relief was instant. The tension in my back released, and I could finally adjust the baby, checking to make sure she could breathe. She was sleeping soundly, her tiny mouth making small sucking motions in her dreams. I brushed a damp lock of hair away from her forehead. Her skin was perfect, untouched by the grime of the world. "This is the last time," I murmured to her, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "I promise you, you will never be this cold again. You will never be treated like second-class cargo again." My phone buzzed in my pocket, a long, sustained vibration, then another, and another. I fished it out, my fingers stiff. A notification from Instagram. "Graham Pierce is live. Victory dinner at Aurora Prime." My thumb hovered over the screen. I should have turned it off. I should have thrown the phone into the same puddle where he threw the money. But a dark, masochistic compulsion took over. I needed to see. I needed to witness the magnitude of the erasure. I tapped the screen. The video loaded instantly, the connection crisp and bright. The camera was angled high, capturing a table laden with seafood towers, glistening steaks, and a bottle of wine that I knew cost more than my first car. The lighting was warm and golden, a stark contrast to the blue-gray gloom of the bus. Graham was in the center, his face flushed with wine and triumph. He was laughing at something Darla had said. Brittany was next to him, waving a crab leg at the camera like a baton. "So," Darla's voice cut through the phone's speaker, sharp and clear. I quickly lowered the volume, conscious of the tired construction worker standing next to me. I told her, You cannot serve store-bought pasta at a client dinner. It is just tacky. But you know Eloise? She tries, bless her heart, but she just does not have the palate for this life. My stomach turned. That dinner, I had made the pasta from scratch. I had spent 6 hours rolling dough while 8 months pregnant. My ankles swollen to the size of grapefruits. Darla had eaten 2 plates of it. Graham chuckled, swirling his wine glass. "Mom, be nice. She cooks fine for regular people." Brittany leaned into the frame, her eyes glued to the scrolling comments on the side of the screen. "Oh my God, listen to this one," she squealed. User CryptoKing99 asks, "Where is the wife? Is she shy or just not hot enough for the feed?" They all laughed. It was a relaxed, easy sound, the sound of people who felt untouchable. "She is resting," Graham said to the camera, flashing that charming, dimpled smile that had once made my knees weak. "Recovering. Honestly, it is better this way. Eloise is great, but she is a bit rustic. She does not really fit the brand energy we are building with North Sky. You know, we are aiming for global disruption, high speed. She is more slow lane. Not a fit. Rustic, slow lane. The words didn't just hurt. They clarified. For 2 years, I had twisted myself into knots trying to be the perfect wife for an aspiring tech mogul. I had dimmed my own light so he could shine. I had used my connections quietly, behind the scenes, to open doors for him, letting him believe he had kicked them down himself. I had signed papers without reading them because he said it was just standard legal stuff for the startup. I had played the role of the supportive, simple partner because I thought we were a team. But we weren't a team. I was a prop. And now that the prop was damaged postpartum, tired, rustic, I was being discarded. I looked down at the screen. Graham was raising a toast. "To the future. To North Sky. To the upgrade," Brittany chirped. I hit the power button, plunging the screen into darkness. The bus rattled over a set of train tracks. The baby stirred but stayed asleep. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the wheezing breath of the man standing beside me. I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark window. I didn't see the weak, crying girl from the hospital curb anymore. I saw someone else. I saw the daughter of a man who ate CEOs like Graham for breakfast. I unlocked my phone again. I didn't open Instagram. I opened my contacts. I scrolled past Graham, hubby. I scrolled past home. I scrolled all the way down to the letter M. There was a name there that I hadn't dialed in 730 days, a name that belonged to a life I had walked away from to prove I could be loved for myself. Not my inheritance. Mercer, Elias, head of legal counsel, Whitmore Family Trust. My finger hovered. Calling him was the nuclear option. Calling him meant admitting that my experiment in living a normal life had failed spectacularly. It meant admitting my father was right about Graham from the beginning. But then I remembered the $20 bill. I remembered the way Graham had looked at the leather seat with more concern than he had looked at his daughter. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. "Eloise." The voice was sharp, alert, and utterly professional. There was no confusion, no, "Long time no see." Elias Mercer did not waste breath. "It is me," I said. My voice was steady. The tremble was gone. "Are you safe?" he asked immediately. He knew. Somehow, he always knew when things went sideways. "I am on a bus," I said, "heading to the apartment. Do you want a car? I can have security intercept the bus in 3 minutes." "No," I said. "I need to finish this ride. I need to remember it." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Very well. Why are you calling, Eloise? Is it time?" I looked out the window at the rain lashing against the glass. We were passing the exit for Westlake, just a mile from where Graham was currently swirling his vintage Cabernet. "The rain has started," I said. It was a code we had established years ago. A melodramatic phrase from a childhood spy game that had evolved into a very real legal failsafe. It meant, "Scorched earth. Activate the protocols. Mercy is off the table." "Understood," Elias said. I could hear the sound of typing in the background, fast and rhythmic, like machine gun fire. I am initiating the revocation protocols now. The primary guarantor withdrawal will hit the banking networks in approximately 4 minutes. The asset freeze will follow immediately after. Everything, I said. The cards, the cars, the lease, the intellectual property transfer agreement. We never processed the final assignment on the IP, Elias said, and I could practically hear the shark-like grin in his voice. I kept it in escrow, just in case. The technology belongs to the trust. Eloise, not North Sky. Good, I said. Lock it all. Consider it done. And Eloise? Yes. Welcome back. I hung up the phone. The bus began to slow down for my stop. I stood up, wincing as the incision pulled, but the pain felt distant now, like it was happening to someone else. I nodded to the man in the construction vest. Thank you for the seat, I said. He nodded, tired eyes crinkling. Take care of that little one, ma'am. I will, I said. I am going to take care of everything. I stepped off the bus and back into the rain. But I didn't feel the cold anymore. I walked toward the apartment building that Graham thought he rented, ready to pack the few things that actually mattered. 2 miles away, at Aurora Prime, the waiter was likely approaching Graham's table with the bill. The countdown had begun. I did not need to be sitting at table 12 of Aurora Prime to witness the execution. I had a front row seat, safe and dry, watching the glow of my phone screen as the digital guillotine dropped. My sister-in-law, Brittany, was still live streaming. She had kept the camera rolling, addicted to the attention, convinced that any moment now the glitch would resolve and they would go back to being the royal family of Seattle's startup scene. She had no idea she was filming a crime scene where the victim was her brother's ego. The footage on my screen was crystal clear. The restaurant was bathed in amber light, the air thick with the murmur of polite conversation and the clinking of heavy silverware on fine china. It was the kind of place where a steak cost $80 and the water was imported from glaciers that no longer existed. Graham was leaning back in his chair, looking flushed and satisfied. He raised his hand, snapping his fingers for the check. It was a gesture he had practiced arrogant, dismissive, the universal signal of a man who believes his time is more expensive than the server's dignity. Check, please, he announced, making sure his voice carried to the camera. And put a 20% tip on top. We are celebrating. You are so generous, Graham, Darla cooed. Adjusting her collar, she looked around the room, making sure the neighboring tables were watching. It is good to see you enjoying the fruits of your labor. The server, a young man with a stiff collar and the patience of a saint, placed the leather folder on the table. Graham didn't even look at the total. He opened the folder with a flourish and produced the card. It was a black card, heavy, metal. It made a distinct thud when he dropped it onto the table. It was the card I had added him to 3 months ago. The one linked to the primary Whitmore Trust account, intended for emergency business expenses. He used it like a magic wand. Run it, Graham said. The waiter nodded and produced a wireless terminal from his apron. He inserted the card. The chip reader clicked. We all waited. In the restaurant, there was silence. On the screen, the viewer count was ticking up. People loved to watch rich people spend money. Then, a sound cut through the ambient jazz. Beep! A harsh, dissonant electronic rejection tone. Graham frowned, his smile faltering just a fraction. What was that? I am sorry, sir, the waiter said, his voice low. It was declined. Declined. Graham let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. That is impossible. That is a Centurion card. It has no limit. Try it again. Your machine is probably having connection issues with the rain. Of course, sir, the waiter said. He removed the card, wiped the chip on his apron, a gesture that looked agonizingly pedestrian for such a high-status object, and inserted it again. Processing Brittany zoomed in on the machine. Technical difficulties. Guys, she chirped to her followers. Even the best tech fails sometimes, right? Beep. The sound was louder this time, Or maybe the restaurant had just gotten quieter. The waiter looked at the small screen. Declined again, sir. The message says, do not honor. The color began to drain from Graham's face. It started at his jaw and worked its way up to his hairline. Do not honor. Do you know who I am? I am Graham Pierce. I just closed a $10 million merger today. Do not tell me my card is declined. On the right side of my screen, the comments began to shift. The heart emojis were replaced by question marks and laughing faces. Crypto King. 99. Declined. LMAO. Becky _ with _ the _ good _ hair, awkward. Real estate. Rob Bro. Did you forget to pay the bill? Seattle Watcher, is this guy for real? CEO of what? Brittany saw the comments. Her hand holding the phone wavered. Graham, she hissed. Fix it. People are watching. I am fixing it, Graham snapped, his composure cracking. He reached into his wallet and pulled out another card, the Platinum Corporate card for North Sky Dynamics. Use this one, and bring me the manager. Your system is defective. The waiter took the second card. He swiped it. Beep. Declined, the waiter said, his voice flat. Graham pulled out a third card, a personal visa. Beep. Declined. Graham was sweating now. Visible beads of perspiration were forming on his upper lip, glistening under the restaurant's expensive lighting. He was frantically tapping his own phone, opening his banking app. I could see his thumb hitting the screen, over and over again. It says account locked, Graham muttered, staring at his phone in horror. Access restricted by primary holder. What, I am the primary holder? No. Graham, you were never the primary holder. You were the beneficiary. And beneficiaries only exist at the pleasure of the benefactor. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted completely. The polite murmur had died. Heads were turning at the nearby tables. A couple in the corner stopped eating their dessert to watch. The show at table 12 was far more interesting than the creme brulee. A man in a sharp navy suit materialized at the table. The manager. He did not look like he was there to apologize. He looked like he was there to contain a biohazard. Is there a problem, Mr. Pierce? The manager asked. His tone was polite, but it was the icy politeness of a bouncer telling you that you have had too much to drink. Your terminals are broken, Graham accused. Standing up, he was trying to use his height to intimidate, but he just looked like a desperate man in a suit that suddenly seemed too big for him. My cards are fine. I have millions in assets. This is a glitch. Sir, the manager said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. I have just processed 3 other checks in the last 2 minutes. Our system is functioning perfectly. The issue is with your funding. Funding? Darla screeched. She slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. How dare you? Do you know who we are? We are the Pierces. My son is a CEO. Then the CEO should be able to pay for his $500 wine, the manager replied. Not missing a beat. The livestream comments were exploding now. It was a waterfall of text. Scam alert. OMG, he is broke. Trust fund, baby, I knew it. Fake it till you make it. Right, drama queen? Oh. 6. This is the best live I have ever seen. Ex-employee North Sky checks bounced last week too. Just saying. Brittany gasped. She tried to end the live stream, tapping frantically at the screen, but her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the phone onto the table. It landed camera up, capturing the ceiling and the distorted faces of her family looking down at it in panic. But the audio was perfect. Stop filming, you idiot, Darla hissed at her daughter. I can't. It is frozen, Brittany wailed. Graham was digging through his pockets, pulling out lint and car keys. He looked wild-eyed. He looked at the manager, then at the bill, then at his mother. He realized he had no way out. Look, Graham said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. There is obviously a banking error, a security freeze or something. I will sort it out in the morning. Here. He unclasped the heavy gold watch from his wrist, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, or at least, that is what he told everyone it was. He held it out to the manager. Take this, Graham said. It is worth $80,000. Keep it as collateral until I come back tomorrow with cash. Just let us go. The manager looked at the watch. He didn't take it. He didn't even reach for it. He just leaned in closer, inspecting the face of the timepiece with a practiced eye. Mr. Pierce, the manager said softly, I cannot accept this. Why not? Graham demanded. It is worth 10 times the bill. Because sir, the manager said, and his voice was a blade sliding between the ribs. We do not accept counterfeit goods. The bezel movement is incorrect. That is a Chinese replica, high quality, but a replica. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just the money, it was the exposure. Graham Pierce, the golden boy, the tech visionary, the man who threw $20 at his wife in the rain, was wearing a fake watch. The illusion wasn't just cracking, it was shattering into a million cheap shards. That is a lie, Graham shouted. I bought this in Geneva. You bought it on Canal Street, the manager said. Now, sir, unless you have another form of payment, I will have to call the police. Theft of services is a felony at this amount. Police. The word hung in the air. Darla looked like she was going to faint. Brittany was sobbing quietly. Then, the sound that would haunt Graham for the rest of his life cut through the tension. His phone rang. It wasn't a normal ringtone. It was the default, jarring trill of an incoming call that demanded to be answered. Graham stared at the screen. I knew what name was flashing there. He picked it up slowly. His hand trembling, he put it to his ear. Who is this? He barked, trying to regain some semblance of control. I could not hear the other side of the call through the live stream, but I knew exactly who it was. I had made the call myself 10 minutes ago. It was Elias Mercer, and I knew exactly what Elias was saying. I had scripted the lines myself. Mr. Pierce, this is Mercer Legal Affairs, representing the Whitmore Family Trust. Graham went still. He stood there, statue still, in the middle of the crowded restaurant. His eyes went wide, the pupils dilating until they swallowed the irises. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He was listening to the dismantling of his life. The spousal guarantee on your accounts has been formally withdrawn effective immediately. The lease on the vehicle you are driving has been terminated due to breach of credit terms. The mortgage on the Elliott Crown apartment has been called due. Graham made a small, choking sound. What? You cannot, Eloise. Is this Eloise? He looked around the room wildly, as if expecting me to pop out from behind a curtain, but I wasn't there. I was a ghost in the machine. Mrs. Gray has instructed us to inform you that the credit line is closed. Elias would be saying right now, all assets funded by the trust are frozen. You have zero access, zero liquidity. Graham dropped the hand holding the phone to his side, but the call was still connected. He looked at the manager. He looked at his mother. He looked at the fake watch on the table. He looked like a man who had just realized the floor he was standing on was actually a trapdoor, and the latch had just been pulled. It is gone, Graham whispered. The microphone on Brittany's phone picked it up clearly. It is all gone. What is gone? Darla demanded, grabbing his arm. Graham, pay the man. Stop acting like this. I can't, Graham said, his voice breaking. He looked at his mother with the eyes of a terrified child. The accounts, the guarantee. It was Eloise. It was always Eloise. What about her? Darla spat. She cut me off, Graham said. Everything, nothing belongs to me. Not the cards, not the car, not even the company accounts. The manager stepped forward, signaling to the security guard by the door. Sir, I am going to ask you to wait in the office while we contact the authorities. Graham didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just slumped. The air of the CEO, the swagger of the man who mocked the bus riders, evaporated instantly. He was just a guy in a suit he couldn't afford, eating a dinner he couldn't pay for, wearing a watch that told the wrong time. Brittany finally managed to kill the live stream. The screen went black. I sat back on the sofa in the darkness of the apartment that I would be leaving in the morning. The show was over. The tragedy had begun. But I felt no pity. My scar still throbbed. My baby was still sleeping in a laundry basket because her crib hadn't been assembled yet. Graham Pierce had wanted a rain check. He just got a hurricane. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Seattle. Somewhere out there, in the rain, a black SUV was sitting in a parking lot, and its doors were about to lock automatically, sealing them out. I checked the time. It had been exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes since he threw the money in the mud. Justice, it turned out, was faster than Amazon Prime. The transition from the warm, golden interior of Aurora Prime to the freezing Seattle downpour was violent. Graham Pierce did not walk out of that restaurant. He fled, leaving behind a counterfeit watch and a threat of police intervention that hung over his head like a guillotine blade. He burst onto the sidewalk, his Italian loafers skidding on the wet pavement, the rain instantly plastering his expensive suit to his skin. Darla and Brittany followed him, stumbling in their heels, screeching about the cold and the humiliation. They looked like wet rats fleeing a sinking ship, their gala makeup running in dark streaks down their faces. Graham ignored them. He was in survival mode. His world was collapsing, and he needed to find a structural support beam before the roof caved in entirely. He clawed his phone out of his pocket, the screen slick with rainwater, and dialed his private banker at ferocious speed. It rang, and rang, and rang, usually. Marcus at the bank picked up on the first ring. Graham had bragged about it for years. "I have a guy," he would say. "Concierge banking." The line clicked. Graham's chest heaved with relief. "Marcus, thank God. Listen, there is a glitch with the Centurion. A massive error. You need to—" "This is the voicemail of Marcus Reynolds," a robotic voice interrupted. "I am away from my desk. For immediate assistance. Please call the main switchboard." Graham screamed, a raw, guttural sound of frustration, and stabbed the end call button. He dialed his secondary contact. Voicemail. He dialed the emergency line for the credit card company. A recording told him that due to irregular activity linked to a federal investigation, his account required in-person verification at a branch during business hours. Federal investigation. The words made his stomach drop through the soles of his shoes. "Graham," Darla shrieked, clutching her cashmere coat which was now soaking up water like a sponge. "The car. Get us in the car. I am freezing to death." "Right. The car. The sanctuary." Graham sprinted toward the black SUV parked in the loading zone. It was a fortress of solitude, a 6-figure safe space with heated seats and soundproofing. He reached for the handle, his thumb pressing the keyless entry sensor. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder. The door remained solid, unyielding. He fumbled for the key fob in his pocket, jamming his thumb onto the unlock button. The lights did not flash. The mirrors did not unfold. The car sat there, dark and dead, a 2-ton brick of steel and leather. "Open it!" Brittany yelled, shivering violently. Her phone clutched to her chest as if it could save her. "I am trying," Graham roared back. He pulled out his phone again, opening the manufacturer's app to override the lock. The screen loaded, a spinning wheel of doom that seemed to mock him. Then, a red notification banner dropped down from the top of the screen. It was not an error message. It was a sentence of execution. "Access revoked. Reason lease agreement terminated by primary guarantor. Status immobilized for repossession." Graham stared at the words. The rain blurred his vision, but the message was burned into his retinas. Primary guarantor. He had told everyone he bought the car. He had told the magazines he paid cash. But the truth he had buried under layers of bravado, was that his credit score had been too leveraged to qualify for the lease terms he wanted. Eloise had signed. Eloise had put her name on the line so he could drive a car that signaled success he had not earned. And now, Eloise had taken the keys back. "It is locked," Graham whispered, the horror rising in his throat. "We are locked out." "What do you mean, locked out?" Darla demanded. banging her fist against the passenger window. "Break the window. I need to sit down." "I can't break the window." "Mother," Graham snapped, turning on her. "The engine is killed. It won't start. It is gone. The car is gone." Before Darla could process this new level of hell, Graham's phone vibrated again. It was not a call this time. It was a text message. It was from Mike, his CFO at North Sky Dynamics. "Graham, urgent. Payroll account just froze. Attempted to release the bi-weekly transfer and it bounced. Insufficient funds. The bank says the seed capital was withdrawn. The vendors for the server farm just cut us off. Site is going down in 10 minutes. What is going on?" Graham felt his knees buckle. He leaned against the wet metal of the SUV to keep from falling. The seed capital, the $2 million that had launched the company. He had always been vague about where it came from, hinting at angel investors in Silicon Valley. But it had come from the family trust. He had assumed that meant his family trust. He had assumed Eloise was just the conduit for money that he, as the husband, was entitled to. Another vibration, another blow. This time it was an email notification. The subject line was in all caps. "Notice of withdrawal. Venrock Capital." He tapped it open with trembling fingers. "Mr. Pierce, regarding our tentative Series A commitment. Due to a sudden flagging of your primary liquidity source during our final due diligence sweep, we are rescinding the offer effective immediately. The risk profile of North Sky has shifted from promising to volatile. Do not contact us again. The investors were fleeing. The rats were not just leaving the ship. They were torpedoing it on the way out." Graham looked up at the sky. Letting the rain hit his face, he felt like he was being physically beaten. Every vibration of the phone was a punch. Every second that passed stripped away another layer of his identity. "Graham," Brittany whimpered. She was tapping her phone. "I tried to call an Uber. It says payment method invalid. I tried to use my debit card. It says declined. I can't even get a ride home." "Me neither," Darla said, her voice hollow. She was holding her own platinum card, looking at it as if it were an alien object. "I just tried to use the ATM in the lobby to get cash for a taxi. It ate my card. It swallowed it." "Graham?" The screen said, "Confiscated by issuer." They were stranded. 3 people who thought they owned the city were now stuck on a sidewalk in Westlake, unable to buy a stick of gum, let alone a ride home. "This is sabotage," Graham shouted to the empty street. He looked wild, his hair plastered to his skull, his eyes manic. "Someone is doing this. This is illegal. I am being hacked." "Stop it," Darla hissed, stepping toward him. Her face was twisted not with sympathy, but with a sudden, dawning realization. She looked at her son, really looked at him, and for the first time. She did not see a golden boy. She saw a liability. "You said you handled the finances. You said you were the one bringing in the money." "I am," Graham lied, but his voice cracked. "I built North Sky. I made the deals." "Then why?" Darla asked, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. "Is everything tied to Eloise?" The name hung in the air between them, heavier than the rain. Graham froze. He thought back to the night he met Eloise. She was quiet, dressed simply, reading a book in the corner of a coffee shop. She didn't look like money. She didn't act like money. She acted like a librarian. When they got married, she had signed the papers without reading them, or so he thought. She had never asked for jewelry. She had never asked for credit. She had just existed, supporting him. He had thought she was weak. He had thought she was lucky to have him. His phone buzzed one last time. A system alert from North Sky Corporate Security. User Graham_Pierce. Status suspended. Administrative lockout. Initiated by board secretary. He had been fired from his own company in the span of 20 minutes. The dominoes had not just fallen, they had crushed him. The restaurant manager stepped out of the front doors of Aurora Prime, flanked by 2 security guards. He pointed a finger at Graham. "Sir, the police are 5 minutes away. If you leave this property, we will add fleeing the scene to the charges." Graham looked at the manager. then at his mother, then at the useless black SUV. He remembered the $20, the bill he had thrown in the mud. He remembered the look on Eloise's face. It wasn't sadness. He realized that now. It wasn't defeat. It was pity. She had looked at him with the same pity a human looks at a bug right before the boot comes down. Eloise, Graham whispered. The name tasted like bile. He closed his eyes, and a memory flashed in his mind. Their wedding day. Her father. A man Graham had only met twice. A man who wore tweed jackets and drove a 10-year-old Volvo. Graham had dismissed him as a boring academic. He remembered the name on the wedding invitation. Eloise Whitmore Gray. Whitmore. He had never asked. He had been too busy talking about himself to ever ask about the Whitmore part. Whitmore, Graham said aloud, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. The Whitmore Trust? The Seattle Whitmores? Darla gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. The shipping magnates, the real estate developers, Graham, tell me you did not just declare war on the Whitmore family. Graham looked at his mother. He looked at the water dripping off his nose. He looked at his shaking hands. I didn't know, he stammered. She buys generic cereal. She drives a Honda. She never told me. She didn't have to tell you. Darla screamed, losing all composure. You are her husband. You are supposed to know who you are sleeping with. I threw $20 at her, Graham muttered, his mind snapping back to the inciting incident. I threw $20 at a Whitmore. He started to laugh. It was a hysterical, broken sound that frightened Brittany enough to make her step back. She has it all, Graham said, staring at the locked car. The lease, the startup capital, the credit lines, the house. It is all her name. It is all her money. He turned to the street, looking into the dark, rain-slicked void. Somewhere out there, Eloise was watching. He knew it now. She wasn't the victim. She was the architect. Eloise, he shouted into the rain, not caring who heard. Eloise, pick up the phone. But the phone was silent. The network was dead to him. He was a man who had built a castle on a foundation of sand, and the tide had just come in, and not just any tide, a tidal wave named Eloise. We have to go to her, Darla said, grabbing his lapel and shaking him. We have to fix this, now, before the police get here. Where is she? She went home, Graham said, to the apartment. Then we walk, Darla commanded, though her voice trembled. We walk to the apartment and we beg. Do you hear me? Graham, we beg. Graham looked down at his ruined Italian shoes. A walk to the apartment in this rain would take 40 minutes. But the police, Brittany cried. Let them follow us, Graham said, his eyes hollow. I would rather face the police than face what comes next if we don't get that money back turned on. He took a step into the darkness, leaving the luxury SUV behind like a tombstone. He was walking now, just like he had told his wife to do. The irony was not lost on him, but the cold was, because the chill spreading through his veins wasn't from the rain. It was the absolute, 0-degree terror of a man who realizes he has been hunting a predator. The sedan that Elias sent did not take me to the cramped apartment in Capitol Hill, where the heating vents rattled and the neighbors argued through the walls. Instead, it glided silently through the wrought iron gates of Harbor Light Postpartum House, a facility tucked away in a quiet forested enclave of Queen Anne. It was a place that did not advertise, because the people who needed to know about it already knew. The car stopped under the porte-cochere. A doorman with an umbrella was there before the engine even cut out. He opened the door, shielding me and the baby from the relentless Seattle downpour. Welcome back, Ms. Whitmore, he said softly. Not Mrs. Pierce, Ms. Whitmore. Hearing my maiden name spoken aloud by someone who treated it with reverence rather than ignorance felt like the first deep breath I had taken in 2 years. I walked into the lobby. It didn't smell like antiseptic or cheap air freshener. It smelled of eucalyptus, white tea, and silence. The lighting was low and warm. The floors were marble, heated from beneath so that when I stepped out of my soaked sneakers, the warmth seeped instantly into my frozen feet. Your suite is ready, Eloise, the concierge said, bypassing the check-in desk entirely. Doctor, Aris is waiting upstairs to check your incision. We have a night nurse on standby for the baby whenever you are ready to rest. I nodded, unable to speak. I was not crying. I had left my tears in the puddle outside the hospital. Now, I was just numb, moving through the world with the strange, detached clarity of a soldier who has just walked away from a crash site. Half an hour later, I was a different person. I had showered. The water had been hot, the pressure perfect, washing away the mud from the street, the sweat of the bus ride, and the invisible grime of Graham's contempt. I stood under the spray for a long time, watching the water swirl down the drain, imagining it was taking the last 2 years of my life with it. I was now wearing a robe made of Egyptian cotton, soft and thick. My wet clothes, the stained sweatpants. The cheap jacket had been taken away to be laundered or burned. I didn't care which. I sat in a plush armchair by the window, looking out at the rain-streaked glass. The pain in my abdomen was still there, a dull, throbbing reminder of the surgery. But it was manageable now. I had taken the medication the doctor gave me. I was clean. I was safe. My daughter lay in a bassinet next to me. She was swaddled in fresh linen, sleeping the deep, peaceful sleep of the innocent. She had a name now. I had decided it on the bus ride over. Clara. It meant clear, bright, famous, everything her life was going to be from this moment on. There was a knock on the door, not a demanding pound, but a respectful tap. "Come in," I said. Elias Mercer entered. He looked exactly as he always did, immaculate in a charcoal suit, rimless glasses reflecting the soft light, holding a tablet as if it were a sacred text. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like an executioner who killed with paperwork. "You look better," Elias said, taking the seat opposite me. He didn't ask how I felt. He assessed the data points: clean hair, steady hands, calm demeanor. "I feel awake," I replied, "for the first time in a long time." "Good, because we have work to do." Elias placed the tablet on the low coffee table between us. "I have executed the preliminary protocols as you instructed. I want to confirm the scope before we initiate the secondary phase." "Tell me," I said. Elias tapped the screen. "First, the credit facilities, the primary Centurion card, the North Sky corporate accounts, and the supplementary lines linked to the Whitmore Trust have all been suspended. As of 45 minutes ago, Mr. Pierce has zero purchasing power. He is effectively insolvent." I nodded. I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was cold, clinical. And the vehicles? The Range Rover lease was under a corporate guarantee backed by your personal assets. We triggered the material change in circumstances clause. The vehicle has been remotely immobilized. If he is not still with it, a retrieval team is already en route to collect it. "He is probably still staring at it," I said, remembering how much he loved that car. He loved it more than he loved me. "What about the apartment?" "The Elliott Crown Residences," Elias recited without looking at his notes. "The lease is in your name, Eloise. He is listed as an occupant, not a tenant. I have already contacted building management. They have deactivated his key fob and the fobs of his guests. Access to the unit is barred. Security has been instructed to deny entry. He will try to get in," I said. "He will make a scene." "Let him," Elias said, his voice void of emotion. "It only strengthens our position. Speaking of scenes, we have obtained something interesting." Elias swiped on the tablet and turned it toward me. It was a video file, not the live stream from the restaurant, but grainy, high-angle footage in black and white. It was from a security camera. I watched the screen. I saw a small figure standing on a curb in the rain. I saw the black SUV pull up. I saw the window roll down. And then, I saw it. The arm extending, the flutter of paper, the car driving away, splashing water over the woman holding the baby. "The head nurse at Cascade Memorial contacted me," Elias explained. "Apparently, she saw you leave and was concerned. When she checked the security feed to see if you had been picked up. She saw this. She flagged it immediately. We have secured the raw file. It is preserved on our servers. I watched the video again. It looked even worse from a distance. It looked like a crime. It looked like abandonment. This is admissible, I asked. Admissible. Elias raised an eyebrow. Eloise, this is catastrophic for him, in family court. This is not just evidence. It is a character assassination. It shows total disregard for the welfare of a post-operative mother and a newborn. Combined with the financial fraud we are uncovering in his company records, Mr. Pierce will be lucky if he's allowed to see a photograph of Clara, let alone have custody. He threatened to take her, I said softly. On the phone, before the birth, he said if I ever left him, his lawyers would crush me. His lawyers, Elias said with a dry chuckle. He uses a strip mall firm in Bellevue. We are the Whitmore Trust. We do not get crushed. Eloise, we do the crushing. He leaned forward, his expression softening just a fraction. I have drafted the emergency protection order. It cites financial abuse, emotional cruelty, and physical negligence. I also have the petition for temporary sole custody ready for your signature. Once filed tomorrow morning. He cannot come within 500 feet of you or the child without facing arrest. Do it, I said. And communication? Elias asked. He has been trying to call the main switchboard here. We have blocked him, obviously. I looked down at my own phone, sitting on the marble side table. It was on silent, but the screen kept lighting up. Graham 12 missed calls, Darla 8 missed calls, Brittany 5 missed calls, unknown number 3 missed calls. They were panicking. The silence was hurting them more than any scream could. They were used to me explaining, apologizing, fixing. They were waiting for me to pick up and tell them it was all a mistake, that I would transfer the money, that I would come pick them up. They did not understand that the Eloise they knew had died in the rain. I reached into the pocket of my robe. My fingers closed around a piece of paper. It was stiff, crinkled, and dry now. I pulled it out, the $20 bill. I smoothed it out on the glass surface of the table. It looked pathetic against the luxury of the room. It was stained with street water. It was a dirty, common thing. He told me to take the bus, I said, staring at Andrew Jackson's face. He told me to buy a slice of pizza. Elias looked at the bill. Do you want me to dispose of that? No, I said. I want to frame it. I looked up at Elias. This is my receipt. Elias, this is the price he put on his family. I want to keep it. I want to look at it every time I start to feel sorry for him. Understood, Elias said. He stood up, smoothing his jacket. I will let you rest. The security team is stationed at the lobby and the service entrance. No one gets in without your approval. And Eloise? Yes. Your father called. He is flying in from Geneva. He will be here in the morning. My chest tightened. My father. The man I had defied to marry Graham. The man who had told me, 3 years ago, he does not love you, Eloise. He loves the reflection of himself he sees in your eyes. Okay, I said. I will see him. Elias nodded and left the room, closing the door with a soft click. I was alone again. Just me, Clara, and the buzzing phone. I picked it up. The screen showed a text from Graham. Eloise, please, this is insane. The police are here. They are talking about fraud. Mom is crying. Just pick up. I'm sorry about the bus. I was stressed. Please, babe, call me. Babe. The word made me nauseous. I opened a new message window. I typed slowly, my thumbs moving with deliberate precision. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to curse. I wanted to draw a line in the sand that could never be crossed again. Do not contact me or my family again. All future communication must be directed to Elias Mercer at Whitmore Legal Counsel. If you attempt to approach me or my daughter, you will be arrested. I hit send, almost immediately. The phone began to ring. It was Graham. I watched the screen light up the dark room. I watched his face, a photo I had taken on our honeymoon. where he looked so handsome, so full of promise, flash on the display. I didn't decline the call. That would be a reaction. That would be an engagement. I simply turned the phone over, placing it face down on the marble table. I listened to the vibration against the stone. Bzzzt, bzzzt, bzzzt. It sounded like a fly hitting a window pane, trying to get in, not realizing that the glass was solid and the door was locked forever. I stood up and walked to the bassinet. I picked up Clara, holding her warm weight against my shoulder. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, in the wet dark, Graham Pierce was realizing that he was not the main character of this story. He never was. He was just a lesson I had to learn. And the tuition had been exactly $20. I kissed my daughter's head, inhaled the scent of baby powder in peace, and for the first time in 3 days. I closed my eyes and truly slept. The storm was coming for them, but here, in the eye of it, it was perfectly, beautifully quiet. While I was settling into the crisp, high-thread count sheets of the recovery suite at Harbor Light, soaking in the silence and safety. My husband, or rather, the man who was legally still my husband for perhaps another 48 hours, was discovering that the bottom of the barrel had a basement. I know exactly what happened next. I know because Elias Mercer is thorough. I know because the building management at the Elliott Crown Residences sent a detailed incident report to my legal team to justify the security deposit deduction. And I know because, in a way, I had been writing this scene in my head for 2 years. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night when the three of them, Graham, Darla, and Brittany, trudged up to the glass and steel entrance of the Elliott Crown. They had walked the whole way from the restaurant. The rain had turned Graham's Italian wool suit into a heavy, misshapen sack. Darla's hair, usually a helmet of hairspray, was plastered to her skull. Brittany was limping, holding her broken designer heels in one hand, walking barefoot on the filthy Seattle sidewalk. They looked like refugees from a failed gala, but they still had the arrogance to believe this was just a bad dream. They thought they were coming home. Graham stepped up to the main secure entry. He fished the key fob out of his wet pocket. It was a sleek black rectangle that he used to flash at bars to show people where he lived. He tapped it against the sensor. Usually, there would be a cheerful chirping sound and a green light. Instead, the sensor let out a low, flat buzz. The small LED light flashed angry red. Graham wiped the rain off the fob and tried again. He pressed it harder, as if physical force could override digital code. Buzz, red. "It is wet," Graham muttered, shaking the fob. "The sensor is wet." "Just call the concierge," Darla snapped, shivering violently. "Tell him to open the damn door." Graham pressed the intercom button. "Hello, it is Graham Pierce. Penthouse B, my key is not working." The speaker crackled. The voice that came through was not the friendly weekend doorman who Graham usually ignored. It was the night security supervisor. "Mr. Pierce," the voice said, tinny and distorted by the rain. "Access to the building has been restricted. Please do not attempt the sensor again, or it will trigger a silent alarm." "Restricted?" Graham shouted at the speaker. "I live here. Open this door right now, or I will have your job." "Please wait," the voice said. "The building manager is coming out." A moment later, the heavy glass doors slid open. But they were blocked by the large frame of Mr. Henderson, the building manager. He was holding a tablet, and he was flanked by 2 uniformed security guards. He did not invite them into the warm, dry lobby. He stood in the doorway, creating a wall. "Mr. Henderson," Graham said, trying to summon his CEO voice but failing because his teeth were chattering. "This is ridiculous. My key is broken. Let us in." "Your key is not broken. Mr. Pierce." "Mr. Henderson said. He tapped the screen of his tablet and turned it around so Graham could see. "Your lease agreement has been terminated, effective immediately." Graham squinted at the screen through the rain. "Terminated. You can't evict a tenant without 30 days' notice, I know the law." "Technically, you are not the tenant," Henderson said calmly. "You are a listed occupant. The leaseholder is Ms. Eloise Gray, and the guarantor for the lease is the Whitmore Family Trust. At 8:45 this evening, the trust invoked the breach of financial security clause in the rental agreement. They withdrew the guarantee. "So what?" Darla screamed from behind Graham. "We will pay the rent. My son is the CEO of North Sky Dynamics. Send us a bill." Henderson scrolled down on the tablet. "Actually, Mrs. Pierce, that brings us to the second issue. Ms. Gray's automatic payments covered the base rent of $8,000 a month. However, the account for the incidentals, the parking fees, the concierge services, the private dining room bookings, and the late fees for the last 3 months was linked to Mr. Pierce's personal credit line." He turned the screen again. The number was highlighted in red. It was a staggering amount. $12,400 in outstanding amenity fees. Henderson read, "We have been trying to charge the card on file for 2 hours. It comes back, declined fraud alert. So, until this balance is cleared and a new lease is signed with a valid guarantor, you are trespassing." "I am a CEO," Darla yelled again, stamping her foot in a puddle. "You cannot treat us like this." "Ma'am," Henderson said, his voice dropping an octave, "a CEO who does not pay his rent is just a squatter in a nice suit. We have policies." "Where are our things?" Brittany cried, looking past the manager into the brightly lit lobby. "My clothes? My makeup." Henderson stepped aside slightly and pointed to the far corner of the lobby. Near the service elevator and the emergency exit, there was a pile of cardboard boxes. They were not professional moving boxes. They were the mismatched, scavenged boxes that the maintenance staff used for recycling. They were stacked haphazardly, bursting at the seams. I could see even in my imagination the sleeve of Graham's velvet tuxedo hanging out of one, getting dusty. Brittany's collection of handbags was jammed into a crate meant for bananas. "We exercised our right to clear the unit under the emergency abandonment protocol," Henderson said. "Personal effects have been boxed. Furniture stays, as it belongs to the staging company Eloise hired. You have 10 minutes to remove these items from the premises before we have them hauled to the curb." "The curb," Graham whispered. "The curb." Henderson confirmed. "We cannot have clutter in the lobby. It ruins the aesthetic for the actual residents." The humiliation was absolute. They had to scramble. Under the watchful eyes of the security guards, Graham, Darla, and Brittany began dragging the soggy cardboard boxes out of the lobby and under the small overhang of the service entrance. They stood there, surrounded by the debris of their fake life. It was a pile of expensive fabric and useless gadgets, rapidly absorbing moisture from the Seattle air. "We need money," Graham said, staring at a box filled with his sneaker collection. "We need a hotel. I can't fix this without a laptop and Wi-Fi." "I have the ring," Brittany said suddenly. She pulled her hand out of her pocket. On her finger was the massive, glittering stone Graham had given her for her 21st birthday. He had told the whole family it cost $15,000. He had made a toast about how Pierces only wear the best. "We can pawn it," Brittany said, her eyes wild with hope. "There is a 24-hour place on 3rd Avenue. It is sketchy, but they pay cash." "No," Graham said quickly. "Brittany, don't. We have to," she insisted. "This is a 3-carat diamond. Graham, it will get us a suite at the Four Seasons for a week." She didn't wait. She grabbed an umbrella from one of the boxes and took off running down the wet street, limping on her bare feet. Graham tried to stop her, but he was too exhausted. He just slumped against the brick wall next to his mother. 20 minutes later, Brittany returned. She wasn't running anymore. She was walking slowly. Dragging the umbrella, she threw the ring at Graham. It bounced off his chest and clattered onto the wet concrete. "They laughed at me," she said. Her voice was flat, dead. "Brittany," Graham started. "They put a loop on it," she said. "The guy laughed so hard he choked. He said it is cubic zirconia. He said the band is brass dipped in gold. He said he wouldn't give me $5 for it because the brass is turning green." She looked at her brother with pure hatred. "You told me it was Tiffany. You gave me a blue box." "I bought the box on eBay," Graham whispered. I needed the cash for the seed funding. I thought I would replace it later, when we made it big. You are a fraud, Brittany spat. Everything is fake. The watch, the car, the ring, you. Darla was sitting on a box of kitchenware, staring blankly at the rain. Stop it, she said weakly. Graham, call your friends, call the investors, call the frat brothers. Someone will take us in. Graham pulled out his phone. He had 12% battery left. He called Jason, his best friend from college, the one who was the groomsman at our wedding, declined. He called the venture capitalist who had promised him the world last week, blocked. He called the guys he played poker with, the ones who drank his scotch and laughed at his jokes about his boring wife. One of them actually picked up. Dave, Graham said, desperate. Dave, man, I am in a bind. I need a place to crash for one night. Just one night. There was a mix-up with the bank. Graham, Dave said. His voice was cold. Have you seen Reddit? What? The Seattle Tech thread. There is a leaked email from your board. It says North Sky under investigation for embezzlement and misappropriation of funds. It says you were using company capital to pay for personal luxury leases. That is a lie, Graham shouted. That is a misunderstanding. It says the whistleblower is the Whitmore Trust. Dave said, Dude, you stole from the Whitmores. You are toxic. Don't call me. I don't want to be subpoenaed. Click. Graham stared at the phone. The screen dimmed. They know, he said. Everyone knows. I am done. They sat there in silence for a long time. The rain kept falling. The boxes were getting soggy, collapsing under their own weight. The North Sky Empire was now a wet pile of cardboard in an alleyway. We can't sleep here, Darla said. Her voice was trembling, but there was a strange, frantic edge to it now. She stood up. We can't sleep on the street. I am Darla Pierce. We have nowhere to go. Mom, Graham said. No money, no friends, no credit. There is one place, Darla said. She grabbed Graham's shoulder, her fingers digging into his wetsuit jacket. Eloise, she has family. She hates us, Graham said. She just destroyed us. No, Darla said, her eyes darting around. She is angry, but she is weak. She always caves. Listen to me. I remember years ago when you first started dating. She mentioned her father lived in Medina. Medina. Graham looked up. Medina was where Bill Gates lived. It was the most exclusive zip code in the state. Eloise doesn't have family in Medina. Her dad is a professor. No, listen, Darla insisted. She said her family was in service to a big estate there, or maybe she said they kept the grounds. I remember thinking, oh, her people are the help. That is why she is so mousy. She comes from servant stock. I almost laughed out loud in my hospital room when I imagined this. My father, Robert Whitmore, who owned half the shipping containers in the Pacific Northwest, being mistaken for the gardener. It was perfect. It was exactly the kind of classist delusion that Darla needed to survive. If her dad is a caretaker or a butler there, Darla reasoned, her logic twisting into knots. He will have a servant's quarters, a cottage, something. We go there. We demand they let us in. We tell him his daughter has lost her mind and left her husband on the street. He will be scared of us. The help is always scared of the upper class. Mom, Graham said, we are not upper class anymore. We are homeless. We are Pierces, Darla shrieked. And I am not sleeping on a box. We are going to Medina. We will find this servant father of hers, and we will make him fix this. How? Brittany asked, kicking the fake ring into the gutter. How do we get to Medina? It is across the bridge. It is 10 miles away. Darla looked at the sleek black Uber pulling up to the curb for a resident of the building, a resident who actually paid rent. We have feet, Darla said grimly, and we have rage. Graham, pick up the box with the dry clothes. We are walking to the ferry terminal. The ferry. It is cheap, Darla said. I have $5 in coins in my purse. It is enough for 3 walk-on tickets. Graham looked at his mother. He looked at the ruin of his life. He had no better idea. He had no ideas left at all. Okay, he said. We go to Medina. We find her dad. He stood up, his knees cracking. He didn't know he was marching toward a firing squad. He thought he was going to bully a servant. He picked up the soggy box. Let's go. As they walked away from the Elliott Crown residences, leaving half their possessions rotting in the rain, the automatic doors of the luxury building slid shut behind them. The lock engaged with a solid, final thud. They were entering the endgame, and they were bringing a knife to a nuclear war. It was just past midnight when the three of them reached the iron gates of the estate on Evergreen Point Road. They had walked for miles. My security team had tracked their progress via the municipal cameras that lined the streets of Medina. It was a pathetic procession. Graham was leading, hunched over against the wind, clutching the soggy cardboard box that contained the last remnants of his dignity. Darla followed, her once pristine cream coat now heavy with mud and water, dragging her feet, and Brittany trailed behind, shivering so violently her teeth were audible over the storm. Barefoot on the asphalt because her feet were too blistered to shove back into her broken heels. Medina is not like downtown Seattle. There are no streetlights here. There are no sidewalks. It is a place of high hedges, long driveways, and absolute, terrified privacy. The darkness is total, broken only by the occasional sweep of a security patrol car or the amber glow of a surveillance camera lens. They stopped before the gate. It was 12 feet of wrought iron, solid and imposing, flanked by stone pillars that were older than the country they were born in. There was no nameplate. There was no number. People who lived here did not need to be found. Graham stared at the intercom panel. It was brushed steel, glowing softly in the dark. He reached out a trembling hand and pressed the button. He expected a doorbell sound. Instead, there was just a soft, electronic click. "Who is it?" The voice from the speaker was not a tired butler or a confused caretaker. It was deep, crisp, and devoid of warmth. It was the voice of a man sitting in a command center surrounded by monitors. Graham leaned into the speaker, water dripping from his nose. It is Graham Pierce, and my mother and sister. We are family." "Family of whom?" the voice asked. Graham hesitated. He swallowed hard. "Of Eloise Gray. Her father works here. We need to see him. It is an emergency." Silence. The speaker did not crackle. It just went dead. "Hello," Graham said, tapping the button again. "Did you hear me? We are family." Nothing. The wind howled through the Douglas fir trees that lined the driveway, a sound like the ocean roaring. The rain intensified, shifting from a drizzle to a deluge. It was a punishment. It was a physical assault. "Why aren't they answering?" Brittany wailed, hugging herself. "I am going to freeze to death. Graham, my feet are bleeding." "They are checking," Darla chattered, her voice thin and reedy. "They have to check with her father. He is probably asleep in the cottage. They will let us in. They have to." They waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. The cold began to seep into their bones. It wasn't just the temperature. It was the exposure. For the first time in their lives, the Pierces were on the outside looking in. They were the beggars at the feast. They were the ones standing in the mud while the warmth was just on the other side of the metal bars. Darla let out a low moan of misery. She slumped against the stone pillar, sliding down until she was crouching in the dirt. "Please," she whispered to the unyielding iron. "Just open the gate." Then, a light, from deep within the winding driveway, twin beams of high-intensity LED headlights cut through the darkness. They swept across the wet pavement, illuminating the rain like falling diamonds, and then hit the three figures huddled at the gate. Graham shielded his eyes, blindingly bright. "Thank God," he gasped. "They are sending a car to take us to the cottage." The heavy gates began to swing inward. The electric motors hummed silently. Graham stepped forward, a smile of relief breaking across his haggard face. He dropped the box of wet clothes, ready to dive into the back seat of whatever vehicle was coming. but the car did not stop to pick them up. It was a long silver sedan, a Maybach. It moved with the slow, heavy grace of a shark. It rolled forward until the front bumper was just inches from Graham's knees, forcing him to stumble back into the mud. The car stopped. The engine purred, a low vibration that Graham could feel in his chest. The rear window, tinted so dark it looked like black oil, slid down. Warm, scented air drifted out. It smelled of jasmine and old money. I sat in the back seat. I was dry. I was wrapped in a cashmere blanket that cost more than Graham's entire wardrobe. In my arms, Clara was sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling in a rhythm that was completely undisturbed by the storm outside. I looked out at them. I saw Graham, his hair plastered to his skull, his eyes wide with shock. I saw Darla, crouching in the mud, looking like a heap of wet laundry. I saw Brittany, shivering and pale, staring at the interior of the car with a hunger that was almost feral. Graham looked at me. Then he looked past me, at the leather seats, the wood paneling, the soft ambient lighting. He looked at the driver, a man with a thick neck and a stoic expression. He realized then, there was no cottage, there was no caretaker. "Eloise," Graham stammered. His voice was small, broken by the wind. "I didn't know. You never said." He took a step toward the car. His hand reached out, instinctively, toward the door handle. He wanted to get in. He wanted to be saved. He wanted to be part of the warmth again. "Stop," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The authority in my voice was absolute. Graham froze, his hand hovering inches from the metal. "Do not touch the car." "Graham," I said. My voice was calm, mirroring the tone he had used with me just 8 hours ago. "The leather is new. I do not want you getting it wet." Graham flinched as if I had slapped him. He looked at his hand, then at the car, then at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The mirror image was complete. "Eloise, please," Darla cried out. Pulling herself up from the mud, she lunged toward the window, her face twisted in desperation. "We are dying out here. Look at us. Just let us in. I need a shower. I need to sit down." "You had a seat," I said, looking at her without blinking. "You had a heated seat in an SUV, but you were worried about the smell of antiseptic." "I am sorry," Darla screamed. "I am sorry, I didn't mean it. Just open the door." Brittany, seeing that begging wasn't working, reverted to her default setting. She fumbled in her wet dress pocket and pulled out her phone. It was the only thing she had protected from the rain. She raised it, pointing the camera lens at me, at the baby, at the car. "I am live," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I am recording this. Everyone is going to see this, the victim leaving her family to die in the rain. You are a monster. Eloise, I will ruin you. I will flip the narrative." She tapped the record button. "Look at her. Look at the rich, B." Before she could finish the word, a shadow moved. The front passenger door of the Maybach opened. A member of my security detail stepped out. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall, wearing a black raincoat that shed the water like oil. He moved with terrifying speed. He didn't hit her. He didn't have to. He simply reached out and plucked the phone from Brittany's hand as easily as taking a toy from a toddler. "Hey," Brittany yelled, reaching for it. "That is my property. Give it back." The guard looked at the phone. He looked at Brittany. Then he looked at Graham. "You are on private property," the guard stated. His voice was flat, bored. "Recording images of a protected minor and the residents of the Whitmore estate without consent is a violation of the privacy statutes of the city of Medina, as well as a breach of the restraining order currently being filed. This device is now evidence." He slipped the phone into his waterproof pocket. Brittany stood there, her mouth open, rain falling into it. Her weapon was gone, her connection to the world, her ability to spin lies, her validation. It was all gone. She let out a sob that sounded like something breaking. "My phone," she whispered. "That was everything." No, I said from the car. That was nothing. You are about to learn what everything actually costs. I looked at Graham one last time. He was shaking, not just from the cold, but from the total, crushing weight of his own insignificance. He looked at Clara, sleeping in my arms, and I saw a flicker of genuine pain in his eyes, not because he loved her, but because he realized he had thrown away the only thing that could have ever made him real. Eloise, he whispered, we have nowhere to go. Please, just $20. Give me $20 for a taxi. I looked at him. I remembered the feeling of the wet bill in my hand. I remembered the smell of the exhaust fumes as he drove away. I don't carry cash, I said. It is a bit rustic. I pressed the button on the armrest. The black window began to slide up, sealing the warmth back inside, shutting out the rain and the pleading faces. Wait, Graham shouted, slamming his hand against the glass. I ignored him. I turned to the driver. Drive? The driver asked. No, I said softly, looking at the digital clock on the dashboard. Pull forward 10 feet, just inside the gate, and then stop. Stop, ma'am. Yes, I said. Leave the headlights on. Let them stand there. Let them watch us be warm. For how long? I looked at the rain lashing against the window, blurring the distorted faces of my husband and his family. 2 hours, I said. Exactly 2 hours. The car rolled forward, the tires crunching on the gravel. We crossed the threshold of the gate. The heavy iron doors swung shut behind us, latching with a sound like a prison cell closing. But the Pierces were not in the cell. They were on the outside, and for the first time in their lives, they were realizing that the world is a very cold place when you don't have a checkbook to burn for warmth. I settled back into the seat, adjusting the blanket around my daughter. We waited, and in the rain, so did they. The 2 hours of waiting in the rain were not an act of cruelty. They were an act of calibration. By the time the heavy oak service door, not the main entrance, never the main entrance for people who smell like wet dogs, and desperation was finally unlocked, the three of them were no longer enraged. They were broken, they were shivering, waterlogged, and terrified. Security escorted them through the mudroom. There were no warm towels offered, no hot tea, just a curt instruction to wipe their feet and not to touch the walls. We led them through the back corridors of the estate, the halls lined with black and white photos of ships and dockyards that bore the name Whitmore on their hulls. I watched Graham's eyes dart to the photos. I saw the moment the geography of his mistake began to map itself out in his mind. He wasn't just in a big house. He was in the belly of the beast that owned the logistics of the entire Pacific Northwest. We entered the main library. It was a room designed to intimidate, not through gold leaf or flashy art, but through the sheer, crushing weight of history. The ceilings were 20 feet high, lost in shadow. The walls were lined with books that looked like they hadn't been moved in a century. A fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, offering the only light in the cavernous space. My father, Robert Whitmore, sat in a wingback leather chair near the fire. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing a simple cashmere cardigan and reading glasses, holding a tumbler of whiskey. He didn't look up when we entered. He turned a page of his book, the sound of the paper loud in the silence. Graham stopped 10 feet away. He was dripping water onto a Persian rug that was likely woven before the concept of the United States existed. "Sir," Graham croaked. His voice was a ruin. "Mr. Whitmore, I did not know." My father closed the book slowly. He placed it on the side table. He took a sip of his whiskey. Then, finally, he looked at Graham. It was a look of absolute, terrifying neutrality. It wasn't anger. Anger implies that the other person matters enough to provoke an emotional response. This was the look a biologist gives a specimen that is about to be dissected. "You are dripping on my floor, Mr. Pierce," my father said softly. "I am sorry," Graham stammered, instinctively reaching down to wipe the floor with his wet sleeve, then realizing how pathetic that looked and stopping halfway. the gate. The gate functioned exactly as designed, my father said. He gestured to the 3 stiff wooden chairs arranged in front of his desk. They were uncomfortable chairs, Inquisition chairs. Sit. Do not touch the upholstery. Darla and Brittany collapsed onto the chairs. Shivering, Graham sat on the edge, his hands clasping his knees. I stood behind my father's chair, my hand resting on the back of the leather. Elias Mercer stood to the side, a table filled with files arranged with military precision next to him. "We are here to clarify the accounting," my father said. Elias stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He simply picked up the first heavy file folder and dropped it onto the low table in front of Graham. Thud. The sound echoed like a gavel. "This," Elias said, his voice crisp, "is the asset trace for the last 24 months, the lease on the Elliott Crown apartment, the lease on the Range Rover, the membership dues for the Rainier Club, the credit card statements for the shopping sprees at Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus." Graham stared at the file. "I know," he whispered. "Eloise co-signed. I get it." "She did not co-sign," Elias corrected. "She fully funded. You see, Graham, your credit score has never been above 650. No bank in this city would have given you a lease on a coffee maker, let alone a penthouse. Every signature you thought was yours was actually a secondary authorization on a Whitmore Trust account." "But I paid the bills," Graham protested, looking at me. "I transferred money every month." "You transferred money into a holding account," Elias said, "which was then used to pay off the interest on your own spending. You were essentially paying an allowance to yourself, while the trust covered the principal." Elias picked up the second file. This one was thicker. Red tape bound the edges. Thud. "North Sky Dynamics," Elias said. Graham straightened up. This was his territory. His baby. "Now wait a minute. That is my company. I built that. I raised the seed round. I closed the Series A." "Did you?" my father asked. His voice was low, amused. Graham looked at him. "Yes, I pitched to Venrock. I pitched to Sequoia. I got $2 million in seed funding." "You pitched to shell companies," my father said. "You walked into rooms, showed your little slide decks, used your buzzwords about synergy and disruption, and those investors nodded and wrote you checks. Did you never wonder why the due diligence was so fast? Did you never wonder why they never asked to see the back-end code?" Graham went pale. "What? Venrock Capital, LLC, is a subsidiary of Whitmore Holdings," Elias explained, tapping the file. "So is Blue Point Ventures. So is the angel group that gave you the bridge loan last month." The room seemed to tilt. Graham gripped the arms of the chair. "I don't understand," he whispered. "It is simple physics, Mr. Pierce," my father said. "Eloise came to me 2 years ago. She said she wanted to marry a man with potential. She said you had a vision but needed a start. So, I bought your vision. I instructed my family office to fund your little startup. Not because it was a good investment, your business model is derivative and your burn rate is offensive, but because my daughter wanted you to feel like a man." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush lungs. Brittany let out a small, shocked gasp. "You mean we are not rich? Even the company money is her money." "It was never your money," Elias said brutally. "It was a sandbox we built so you wouldn't break anything real, and the intellectual property, the code base." Elias dropped a single, thin sheet of paper on top of the pile. "The developers you hired," Elias said. "We pay them directly. The IP assignment clause in their contracts lists Whitmore Technology Trust as the owner. You have been CEO of a company that owns nothing. You are renting the chair you sit in, the computer you type on, and the ideas you claim are yours." "This is entrapment," Darla shrieked. She stood up, her wet coat flapping. "You tricked him. You let him believe he was successful. That is psychological abuse." My father turned his head slowly. He looked at Darla. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't stand up. He just looked at her with eyes that had stared down union strikes and hostile takeovers. "Sit down," my father said. "I will not," Darla cried. though she was already shrinking. I am his mother. I have rights. You cannot just— You have no rights in this house, my father said. You have no voice in this room. You are a guest who has overstayed her welcome by exactly 2 years. If you speak again, I will have security remove you and place you on the other side of that gate. And it is still raining very hard. Mrs. Pierce, Darla's mouth snapped shut. She sat down. Graham was staring at the files. He was shaking his head, over and over. Why? He asked, looking at me. Why did you do it? Why let me play the big shot if it was all charity? I stepped out from behind my father's chair. I walked around the desk until I was standing right in front of him. I looked down at the man I had shared a bed with, the man I had cooked for, the man I had tried to build a life with. Because I loved you, I said. And I thought if you felt successful, if you didn't have to fight for every scrap, you would be kind. I thought money would make you safe. I thought it would make you soft. I reached into the pocket of my robe. I pulled out the small, clear plastic Ziploc bag. Inside, the $20 bill was dried and flattened, but the mud stains were still visible on Harriet Tubman's face. I placed the bag gently on top of the pile of legal files. It looked absurd there, a piece of dirty currency sitting atop millions of dollars in legal documents. But money didn't make you kind, Graham, I said softly. It just made you loud. Graham looked at the bill. He remembered the moment, the window rolling down, the casual flick of his wrist, the comment about the pizza. This, I said, pointing to the bag. This is what you gave me. I gave you a company. I gave you a lifestyle. I gave you a daughter. And when I was bleeding and holding your child in the rain, you gave me $20. Graham closed his eyes. A tear leaked out, tracking through the dirt on his cheek. Eloise, I was stressed. The deal. The deal that didn't exist, I reminded him. You were celebrating a victory that my father paid for. I am sorry, he whispered. He slid off the chair, falling to his knees on the rug. It was a pathetic echo of the power pose he loved to strike in boardrooms. Eloise, please, I am sorry. We can fix this. I will change. I will be the husband you want. Just don't take it all away. Don't leave me with nothing. My father stood up then. He moved to the fireplace and poked the logs, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. You misunderstand the situation. Mr. Pierce, my father said, his back to them. She is not taking it away. It was never yours to begin with. You are simply being returned to the factory settings of your life. Elias checked his watch. The separation papers are being drafted now. We will require your signature on the non-disclosure agreements if you wish to avoid criminal prosecution for the misappropriation of the corporate funds. If you sign, we walk away, and you leave with your personal clothes, the ones you actually paid for. If you fight. Elias let the sentence hang. He didn't need to finish it. The stack of files on the table did the talking. Graham looked up at me from his knees. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and realized the glue wouldn't hold. Who are you? He asked, his voice trembling. I lived with you for 2 years. Who are you? I am the woman who cleaned your house, I said. I am the woman who cooked your pasta. And I am the woman who just canceled your subscription to the Good Life. I turned to my father. I am done, Dad. I am going to check on Clara. Go, my father said gently. We will handle the garbage. I walked toward the door. I didn't look back. I heard Darla start to sob, a low, keening sound of total defeat. I heard Brittany whisper something about her phone, and I heard Graham weeping, finally understanding that he hadn't just insulted his wife, he had insulted the only reason he mattered. As I stepped out of the library, the heavy oak doors closed behind me, sealing the noise inside. The hall was quiet. The portraits of the Whitmore ships seemed to look down at me with approval. I touched the pocket where the plastic bag had been. It was empty now. The receipt had been delivered. The transaction was closed. I did not leave the library. My hand hovered over the brass doorknob, but I did not turn it. The sound of Graham's weeping was not the sound of remorse. It was the sound of a predator who realized the cage door had locked. It was a performance. and I needed to see the final act to ensure the curtain never rose again. I turned back around. My father watched me, a flicker of approval in his eyes as I walked back toward the center of the room. I stopped just out of Graham's reach. He was still on his knees on the Persian rug, his wetsuit jacket bunching around his shoulders. When he saw me return, he didn't stand up. He shuffled forward on his knees, reaching out with hands that were shaking. "Eloise," he choked out, "please, think about what you are doing, not to me, to us, to the family. We just had a baby. Clara, she needs her father. You cannot sever a father from his child because of a mistake. You are a mother now. You have to be soft. You have to forgive. Do it for Clara." It was the oldest card in the deck, the family values defense, the weaponization of a child to shield the incompetence of a parent. I looked down at him. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no love, just the cold, mathematical certainty of a scientist observing a specimen. "Stand up, Graham," I said quietly. "You look ridiculous." He scrambled to his feet, wiping his nose, thinking he had found an opening. I know. I am a mess, but we can fix this. For Clara, I will be better. I swear on her life, I will be the dad she deserves." "That is interesting," I said, "because I have a question, a very specific question." "Anything," Graham said, his eyes wide with false hope. "Ask me anything." "When you rolled down that window," I said, my voice steady and low, "and when you reached into your wallet, and when you threw that $20 bill into the mud in that exact second, did you remember that your daughter was in my arms?" The room went silent. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the drumming of the rain against the library windows. Graham's mouth opened, then closed. He blinked. He looked for a lie, a justification, a spin, but there was nowhere to go. The geometry of the moment was too simple. If he said yes, he was a monster who knowingly threw money at his newborn. If he said no, he was a narcissist who didn't even see her. He started, then stopped. He was mute. "That is what I thought," I said. Elias Mercer cleared his throat. It was a sharp, percussive sound. "Since we are discussing Mr. Pierce's dedication to family values and his whereabouts during the pregnancy, I believe Exhibit C is relevant." Elias opened a folder that had been sitting separately from the financial documents. He pulled out a stack of stapled papers and slid them across the polished mahogany desk toward Graham. "What is this?" Graham asked, his voice wary. "These are the itemized credit card statements from the North Sky Dynamics corporate account," Elias said. "Specifically, the business development ledger." Graham went pale. "Those are confidential company expenses. You can't show those to her." "I can," Elias said, "because the company is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Whitmore Trust, and as the auditor, I found some irregularities, specifically monthly payments of $4,000 to a consultant named Sloan Hart." Brittany gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. Even she knew the name. "Sloan is a branding expert," Graham stammered, sweat mixing with the rain on his forehead. "She helped with the logo. She's a contractor." "A very expensive contractor," Elias noted dryly, "and one who seemingly requires a lot of travel. Here we have a charge for a deluxe king suite at the Fairmont Olympic on November 14th, and another at the W Hotel on December 2nd, and a third at the Four Seasons in Whistler on January 10th. Elias paused, letting the dates hang in the air. "January 10th, I said, doing the math in my head. "That was the week I was on bed rest. The doctor said I was at risk for preeclampsia. You told me you were at a tech conference in San Francisco." "I was," Graham shouted, his denial too loud, too brittle. "I had meetings." "The credit card was used for room service in Whistler," Elias said, looking at the paper. "Champagne, oysters, and a spa treatment for two. The recipient of the massage is listed as Ms. Hart." Graham looked at the paper, then at me. The mask had slipped completely. He wasn't just a failure. He was a cliché, a husband who cheats on his pregnant wife while spending her father's money to pay for the hotel room. It was just stress relief, Graham whispered, the excuse so pathetic it barely registered. You were always sick. You were always tired. I had needs. Eloise, a man has needs. And now you have legal bills, Elias said. We are filing this under dissipation of marital assets. We will be seeking reimbursement for every dollar spent on Ms. Hart. Suddenly, a sob broke out from the chair to the left. It was Brittany. She was shaking, her face buried in her hands. I didn't know about the cheating, Brittany wailed. I swear, Eloise, I didn't know he was that stupid. Shut up, Brittany, Graham snapped. No, I won't shut up, Brittany yelled, standing up. She looked at her brother with pure venom. She realized the ship was going down, and she was scrambling for a lifeboat. She turned to me, her eyes wide and terrified. Eloise, listen, I can help you. I can testify. I know things. Brittany, Darla hissed. Don't you dare turn on your brother. He ruined us. Mom, Brittany screamed. He is broke. He is a fraud, and I am not going to jail for him. She looked at me, desperate to trade information for safety. I did it. I took your phone. Last Thanksgiving. Remember when you couldn't find it for an hour? I narrowed my eyes. Yes. I took it, Brittany confessed, the words tumbling out. I went through your emails. I went through your notes. I was looking for something, anything we could use. Graham told me to, he said. Find out if she has a trust fund we don't know about. Find out if she has a secret bank account. He wanted leverage. He wanted to make you sign a post-nuptial agreement that gave him half of everything if you divorced. You violated her privacy, my father asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. I was scared, Brittany cried. Mom and Graham, they pressured me. They said if we didn't get more money, the startup would crash. They made me do it. I looked at Darla, the woman who had criticized my cooking, my clothes, my parenting. She sat there, stone-faced, caught in the headlights of her own greed. Is that true, Darla? I asked. You tried to blackmail me. Darla stiffened. She smoothed her wet skirt, trying to regain some semblance of the matriarch she pretended to be. She realized that denial was futile. So, she switched tactics. She pivoted to the only thing she thought she had left. I did what I thought was best for the family, Darla said, her voice trembling but defiant. But that is in the past. Eloise, we are family. We share blood now. Clara, my granddaughter. She stood up and took a step toward me. Her hands clasped in a pleading gesture. I want to be a part of her life. I can be a good grandmother. I can help you raise her. You need help. Eloise, you are a single mother now. Let me help. Let us put this money business aside and focus on the child. It was almost impressive, the audacity, the sheer, unadulterated gall to ask for access to the child she had watched freeze in the rain. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had sat in the dry, warm car and complained about the smell of antiseptic. You had a choice, Darla, I said. 3 hours ago, you sat in that passenger seat. You saw your granddaughter shivering in the cold. You saw the rain on her face. Darla started. You had a choice, I repeated, cutting her off, between the comfort of a heated leather seat and the safety of your grandchild, and you chose the leather. You chose the upholstery. Darla flinched. You don't get to be a grandmother, I said. Grandmothers protect their own. You just protect your comfort. You will never see Clara again. Not on Christmas. Not on birthdays. Not ever. You can't do that, Graham shouted, slamming his hand onto the desk. The sound cracked like a gunshot in the quiet room. She is my daughter. I have rights. I will sue you for custody. I will drag you through every court in this state. I will tell the judge you are unstable. I will tell them you kidnapped her. My father didn't move. He just took another sip of his whiskey. Elias Mercer sighed, as if he were bored by a tedious television rerun. He tapped the tablet on the table. Mr. Pierce, Elias said, I strongly advise against a custody battle. It would be embarrassing. I don't care, Graham yelled. I am her father. We have the footage from the hospital, Elias listed, counting on his fingers. We have the live stream from the restaurant where you publicly stated your wife was rustic and slow lane while you were intoxicated. We have the testimony of the head nurse regarding your absence during the recovery, and, most damning of all, we have the time-stamped log of your business trip to Whistler with Ms. Hart while your wife was in a high-risk medical state. Elias paused. In the state of Washington, abandonment and proven neglect are strong grounds for the termination of parental rights. If you file for custody, we will counterfile for full termination. We will put Ms. Hart on the stand. We will put the hotel concierge on the stand. We will play the video of you throwing money at a newborn baby on a loop for the jury. Graham stood there, breathing heavily. His chest heaved. He looked at the files. He looked at Elias. He looked at me. He realized he had no ammunition. He was holding a water pistol in a gunfight against a tank battalion. You are destroying me, Graham whispered. You are killing me. My father set his glass down. The sound of the crystal hitting the wood was sharp. She is not killing you, boy, my father said. She doesn't need a knife. She just needs to stop the oxygen. He looked at Graham with eyes that were as cold as the Atlantic. You have been breathing her air for 2 years. You have been spending her money. You have been eating her food. Now, she is simply closing the valve. If you suffocate, it is because you never learned how to breathe on your own. Graham's face twisted. The humiliation was too much. The mix of fear, exhaustion, and the realization of his own fraudulence boiled over into a sudden, violent rage. It is not fair, Graham screamed. He lunged toward the table, his hand raising as if to sweep the files onto the floor, or perhaps to strike something, anything, to make a mark. I built that compa. He never finished the sentence. Before his hand could touch the desk, 2 shadows moved from the corners of the room, the security detail. They were on him instantly. One guard grabbed his right arm, twisting it behind his back with practiced ease. The other secured his left shoulder, pinning him against the edge of the heavy oak desk. Graham shouted in pain, his face pressed against the wood, right next to the Ziploc bag containing the $20 bill. Let me go, Graham yelled. This is assault. This is restraint, the guard said calmly. Stop moving, Darla screamed. Brittany cowered in her chair. I didn't flinch. I watched him pinned there, his cheeks squashed against the varnish, his eyes wild and rolling. He looked like exactly what he was, a trespasser who had been caught. Let him up, I said to the guards. They hesitated, looking at my father. My father nodded. The guards stepped back, releasing him. Graham stumbled up, rubbing his shoulder, panting. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was genuine fear in his eyes. He realized that physical violence was not an option here. He was outmatched in every possible dimension: financial, legal, and physical. Sign the papers, I said to Elias. Give him the pen. Elias slid a single document across the desk. It was the separation agreement. It was simple. He leaves. He takes nothing. He agrees to a permanent restraining order in exchange. We do not file criminal fraud charges for the company embezzlement, yet. Sign it, I said to Graham. And you can walk out of here. Don't sign it, and the police are waiting at the main gate. Graham looked at the pen. He looked at his mother, who was sobbing silently. He looked at Brittany, who refused to meet his eyes. He reached for the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He bent down to sign away his marriage, his company, and his claim to the life he thought he deserved. Ding-dong. The sound of the main doorbell chimed through the house. It was a deep, resonant gong that echoed through the library. Graham froze. The pen hovered over the paper. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. Nobody rings a doorbell in Medina at 1 o'clock in the morning unless it is a catastrophe, or the law. Graham went the color of old ash. He looked at the door. He looked at Elias. You said, Graham stammered. You said if I signed, no police? I said we wouldn't call the police regarding the fraud, Elias said, checking his watch. But I cannot control the actions of the federal agencies regarding the other matter. Other matter, Graham whispered. The investor fraud, my father said, picking up his book again. When you lie to venture capitalists about your liquidity, Graham, that is wire fraud. And when those venture capitalists are subsidiaries of my holding company, well, the SEC tends to take our tips very seriously. The color drained from Darla's face. Graham, what did you do? Graham didn't answer. He just stared at the library door, waiting for it to open, knowing that the night was not over. It was just entering the final, darkest chapter. I think you should sign quickly. Mr. Pierce, Elias suggested, offering the pen again. Before your hands are in cuffs, it is much harder to write that way. Graham grabbed the pen. He scribbled his name. It was not a signature. It was a surrender. And then, the library doors opened. The heavy library doors swung open, revealing the final guests of the evening. They were not uniformed police officers, which might have offered Graham a strange sort of comfort. As criminals understand cops, these men were worse. They were wearing identical beige trench coats and holding leather portfolios that looked heavy enough to sink a ship. There were 3 of them. They moved with the synchronized, predatory quiet of sharks entering a feeding frenzy. The man in the center stepped forward. He didn't look at my father. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at Graham Pierce. Graham Alexander Pierce, the man asked. His voice was flat, devoid of curiosity. Graham swallowed, his throat clicking audibly in the silent room. Who asks? Special Agent Miller, Federal Trade Commission, accompanied by representatives from the Forensic Audit Division, the man said, flipping open a badge that caught the firelight. We are serving you with a federal notice of investigation regarding North Sky Dynamics. We have a warrant to seize all electronic devices, financial records, and personal correspondence related to the misappropriation of investor capital. Graham took a step back, his heel hitting the edge of the Persian rug. Investigation number, no. You have it wrong. It is a startup. We have burn rate. We have overhead. It is all standard. It is wire fraud, Agent Miller corrected. Stepping into the room, he extended a hand holding a thick stack of papers. You accepted $2 million in seed funding from Venrock Capital based on falsified user data and non-existent proprietary algorithms. You then diverted 40% of that capital to personal accounts labeled consulting and lifestyle management. That is not overhead. Mr. Pierce, that is embezzlement. Darla let out a sound that was half scream, half gasp. She grabbed the back of the stiff wooden chair to keep from falling. Graham, tell them it is a mistake. Graham looked at his mother, but he didn't see her. He saw the end of the movie he had been starring in. The credits were rolling, and they were listing him as the villain. Graham stammered. I can explain. The funds were temporary loans. I intended to pay them back. You can explain it to the grand jury, Agent Miller said. He thrust the papers into Graham's chest. Graham instinctively grabbed them, hugging the indictment like it was a life preserver. Brittany was sobbing now, a high, rhythmic hiccuping sound. I didn't know, she kept whispering to the floor. I just wanted the shoes. I didn't know. But nobody was listening to them. The audience had left the theater. Elias Mercer stepped forward, sliding the final document on the desk toward me. The timeline is tight. Eloise, if you sign now, we can attach the restraining order to the federal file. It ensures that when he is processed, he is flagged as a flight risk and a danger to a protected witness. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. It felt cold and solid in my hand. I looked at the paper. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Emergency custody order. Permanent injunction against contact. I didn't hesitate. I didn't tremble. I signed my name. Eloise Whitmore Gray. The letters flowed onto the page, dark and permanent. I was not erasing the past 2 years. I was evicting them. Done, I said, capping the pen. Graham heard the click of the pen cap. It snapped him out of his trance. He dropped the federal indictment on the floor and lunged toward me. It was a desperate, animalistic movement. He wasn't attacking. He was drowning. And he saw me as the only piece of driftwood left in the ocean. "Eloise," he shouted, reaching out his hand. "Don't do this. I am your husband. I am the father of your child. You can stop this. Just tell them." He got within 2 feet of me. My security detail didn't even have to tackle him. They simply stepped in front of me, a wall of black suits and stone faces. Graham slammed into the chest of the lead guard and bounced back, stumbling. "Let me talk to her," Graham yelled, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot and the dirt from the driveway. "Eloise, please just touch my hand. Just look at me." I stepped out from behind the wall of guards. I looked at him. He was a wreck. His suit was ruined. His face was puffy. His hands, the hands that had thrown the money, the hands that had held the wine glass at the restaurant, the hands that had touched Sloane Hart, were reaching out, shaking, stained with mud and ink. "I cannot touch you, Graham," I said. My voice was soft, but it carried to the back of the room. "Why, he wept. "Because you hate me." "No," I said. "Because your hands are dirty, and I do not want to get the leather dirty." It took a second for the words to land. Then, I saw the recognition in his eyes. He remembered the leather seats of his SUV. He remembered the excuse he gave me when I was bleeding. He collapsed. He didn't fall. He just folded, as if his skeleton had been removed. He knelt on the floor, sobbing into his hands, the federal papers scattered around his knees. Elias Mercer adjusted his glasses. "There is one final detail. Mr. Pierce, a point of clarification regarding the asset freeze that you might find ironic." Graham looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "You asked why the accounts were locked so quickly," Elias said. "You assumed Eloise made a phone call." "She did," Graham whispered. "She called you?" "She did," Elias agreed. "But the accounts were already flagged before she dialed. You see, the Whitmore Trust has a very specific clause regarding spousal beneficiaries. It is called the Post-Surgical Abandonment Protocol. It triggers an automatic, irrevocable lock on all assets if the primary beneficiary detects via GPS and spending patterns that the spouse has left the medical facility without the patient, while simultaneously making a purchase of a luxury good." Elias smiled, a thin, shark-like expression. "The system saw your phone leave the hospital zone. It saw Eloise's phone stay, and then it saw you attempt to buy a $200 bottle of wine. The algorithm assumed you had stolen the cards or were fleeing. It locked you out to protect the estate. You didn't just lose the money, Graham. You locked yourself out by being the kind of man who leaves his wife at the curb." Graham stared at Elias. The realization that his own cruelty was the literal key that locked his cage was too much to process. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "Agent Miller," my father said from his chair. "Please remove this debris from my library." Agent Miller nodded. He signaled to his team. They stepped forward, hauling Graham to his feet. He didn't fight. He was limp, a broken toy. "And the women?" the agent asked, gesturing to Darla and Brittany. "They are not under federal investigation," my father said. "Yet, security will escort them to the property line." "The property line," Darla shrieked. "It is pouring rain. It is 2 a.m. How will we get back to the city?" "I believe the ferry runs until 3, my father said, turning a page of his book. "If you walk fast, you might catch it." Security moved in. They took Graham by the arms. He looked back at me one last time as they dragged him toward the door. "Eloise," he whispered. "Please." I didn't look away. I didn't blink. I just watched him disappear into the hallway. Then, they came for Darla and Brittany. Darla tried to cling to the doorframe, screaming about her rights, about being a Pierce. Brittany was silent, staring at her empty hand where her phone used to be. They were peeled away and marched out into the night, back into the rain that they had thought they were too good for. The heavy doors clicked shut. The silence rushed back into the room, filling the space where the noise of their ego had been. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the logs shift in the fireplace. "Come here," my father said. I walked over to his chair. I sat on the ottoman at his feet, just like I used to when I was a little girl. I rested my head on his knee. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I am sorry I didn't listen to you. I am sorry I was silent for 2 years." My father placed his hand on my hair. His hand was warm and heavy. "The mistake was not the silence, Eloise," he said gently. "Silence is a strategy. The mistake was letting them hold the pen. You let them write your life. You let them decide who you were. Never let anyone else hold the pen again." "I won't," I said. I took it back. I reached into my pocket. The Ziploc bag was still there. "Elias," I said. "Yes, Ms. Whitmore. Take this," I said, handing him the bag with the $20 bill. "I want it framed. UV-protected glass, black matte frame. I want it hung in the entryway of the new house. A reminder of the pain," Elias asked. "No," I said, standing up and smoothing my robe. "A reminder of the price. That is the exact moment I stopped asking for permission to be treated like a human being. It is the cheapest education I ever bought." Epilogue. 5 years later, the rain in Seattle never really changes. It is always that same gray, persistent mist. But everything else had changed. I stood on the corner of 4th and Pike, holding the hand of a 5-year-old girl who looked exactly like me. But with her father's dimples the only good thing he ever gave her, Clara was wearing a yellow raincoat and jumping in the puddles. "Mama, look," she shouted, pointing up. Above us, on the side of the Rainier Tower, was a massive digital billboard. It displayed a sleek, minimalist image of a mother holding a child. The text was simple: "The Gray Foundation, legal aid and housing for postpartum mothers. Because no one stands alone. That is you, Mama," Clara chirped. "That is us, baby," I said, squeezing her hand. The foundation had grown faster than I expected. We had 3 centers now. We helped women who were trapped, women who were financially abused, women who had been thrown $20 and told to take the bus. I used the Whitmore influence not to hide, but to fight. "Delivery," a voice shouted from the curb. I turned. A bicycle courier had just skidded to a halt next to the sidewalk, narrowly missing a puddle. He was soaked to the bone, wearing a cheap, neon orange poncho that was ripped at the shoulder. He was wrestling with a heavy insulated food bag on his back. He looked older than his years. His face was gaunt, lined with the stress of a man who lives tip to tip. His hair was thinning, plastered to his forehead by the rain. He looked up to check the building number, and his eyes met mine. He froze. It was Graham. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He didn't look like a man who demanded to see the manager. He looked like a man who had been broken into pieces and put back together wrong. He stared at me. He stared at the well-cut trench coat I wore. He stared at the confident, happy child holding my hand. Then, he heard it. A woman walking past me smiled and nodded. "Good morning, Ms. Gray. Love the new campaign." Graham flinched. He physically recoiled. As if the name Ms. Gray was a physical blow, the color drained from his face. He looked at the billboard above, then back at me. He opened his mouth, maybe to say sorry, maybe to ask for a second chance, maybe just to say hello. But then he looked at Clara. He saw the way she looked at him with total, blank unrecognition. She didn't know him. To her, he was just a wet man on a bike. He closed his mouth. He looked down at his handlebars. He kicked off the curb, pedaling hard, disappearing into the traffic and the rain. Just another cog in the machine he used to think he owned. I watched him go. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I felt peace. "Who was that man?" "Mama," Clara asked, tugging on my hand. I looked down at her and smiled. "Just someone who missed the bus." "Sweetie," I said. "Come on, let's go home." We walked down the street, our footsteps splashing in the water, leaving no ripples behind us. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and redemption. I hope Eloise's journey reminded you that your worth is never defined by how others treat you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. And let's share our thoughts on Graham's karma. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Leona Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story. See you in the next one.